In our previous video, we discussed the essential elements of contract. In this video, we will discuss the different types of contract. So, first being the valid contract. Valid contract are those agreements which is binding and enforceable. So, in order to consider a contract as valid, it has to satisfy all the conditions as prescribed by law in order to become a valid contract. So, for example, if you order a pizza and pay for it, and if the pizza delivers it and everyone is happy, isn't it? So, legally, they have to send the pizza only in order to consider it as a valid contract. So contract we call it as valid when it is legally binding and enforceable. Whereas void contract, which is defined under section 2J, a contract which ceases to be enforceable, by law becomes void. So, what does it mean? It ceases means stops. It stops to be enforceable when it is not valid. So, it becomes void. For example, when an Amar agrees to dance in an event, so if after a while Amar, if he dies or if he becomes injured, so that the contract becomes void because of the impossibility of performance of the contract. So at the time of entering into contract, it was very much valid, but however, the circumstances turned into this contract as void because Ammar in this case is unable to dance because of the death, or if he is injured, or if he meets with an accident and if he is unable to perform, then it is impossible to perform the contract. So it becomes a void contract. So another type is voidable contract, section 2I, wherein in our earlier discussion we pointed out this point at the time of free consent, wherein whenever the contracting parties entered without the free consent, then it is voidable. So let us understand what is this voidable contract. An agreement which is enforceable by law, at the option. So enforceability is optional in this case, meaning either the parties can accept the contract or reject the contract. See, generally what happens whenever the agreement is entered along where there is a enforceability, which we call it as contract, when the contract is entered, it is always unbreakable. There is no option to cancel because once the promise is made, once the contract is entered, it is unbreakable. But here in this case, when we call it as an avoidable contract, the aggrieved parties here gets an option to cancel the contract, or they have an option to either continue or to cancel the contract. So generally, for example, when a person who has been forced to enter, for example, if Mr. X threatens to kill Y, if he does not enter into a contract, then out of this threatening, if the Y enters into a contract, so here Y's consent has been obtained through coercion, meaning it is not with the free consent. So hence this contract is voidable at the option of Y. So Y, if Y decides to avoid, he can avoid the contract, and if he wants to continue, it is his wish, he can continue. So this is the definition of voidable contract. So in fact means where one of the parties to the agreement is in a position or is legally entitled or authorized to avoid performing his obligation. So his obligation he can avoid by treating it as voidable. So void and voidable are two different terms. You should not be confused with this. So void is basically stops to be enforceable, whereas voidable is the aggrieved party gets an option to cancel the contract. So either he can continue or he can avoid the contract. So moving on to the next type as to illegal agreement. It is one which the object of which is unlawful, or if the law is forbidden, and if you are entering in such activities, we call it as illegal agreements. So the court will not be able to enforce it because the contract as such is a unlawful. So here we can understand that all illegal agreements are void, but all void agreements are not necessarily illegal. For example, if you enter into an agreement to kill someone, so it is an illegal agreement as well as void agreement. But however, in with respect to contracts with minors, as we discussed in our essential elements, if you are entering into a contract with minor, it is void. So in such case, contracts entered with minor or agreements entered with minor is not illegal, but it is void. But however, killing or threatening someone to kill is an illegal agreement. So all illegal agreements are void agreements, but all void agreements need not have to be illegal agreements. So you have to understand this difference. Next is unenforceable contract. See, unenforceable contract, it is a contract which is actually valid, but because of some technical defect, it is unable to be enforced. So such contracts can be enforced if the technical defect is removed. For example, if uh, an oral agreement for arbitration is unenforceable all the time because the law requires that arbitration agreement has to be in writing. So if the oral agreement is converted into the written form, then it will become enforceable. So these are the different types of contract as per the basis of validity. So next, on the basis of formation of the contract, let us understand one by one as to what are the different types. The first being the as an express contract. So express contract are basically the terms and conditions are clearly stated or clearly expressed in words or in writing. For example, I will teach you for CA foundation classes for 25,000 rupees. These are expressly spoken. Or if the same condition or same offer is sent through email or sent through letter, it is in written format, which we call it as express contracts, wherein it is one which is made by words spoken or written. Mr. Xavier says to Yasin that, will you buy my car for 1 lakh rupees? So in such case, when Yasin says to Xavier that I am ready to buy your car, it is an express contract made orally. Supposedly, if the same Xavier sends a letter to Yasin for the same buying or selling of car, then it is an express contract made in writing. So next different type is that based on the formation is implied contract. This implied contract comes into existence by way of implication, meaning otherwise than by way of word spoken or written. It is inferred or it is concluded based on the conduct of the person. It is basically identified based on the conduct of the person or the circumstances in a particular case. Suppose a transporter company which is running buses on the different routes to carry passengers. Suppose from Bangalore to Mysore, if the transport company is running a bus, which is a non-stop bus to carry passengers, there is an implied offer by the transport company, and whenever the passenger boards on that bus, it will be an implied acceptance, isn't it? So there is an implied contract between the transporter and the passenger, and the passenger is bound to pay the prescribed fare for the contract being entered. So which we call it as implied contracts. It is based on the conduct of the parties. Another example could be drawing amount from the ATM machine. So we also call it as tacit contracts, wherein the customer is withdrawing cash from the ATM machine is a example for tacit contract. There is another classification called quasi contract, wherein it is not an actual contract but it is a resemblance of a contract. The essential elements of the contract may be missing in this case, but however, the law enforces this type of contract in order to create the legal rights and obligations when there is a no real contract. For example, when you find a wallet or purse belonging to someone else, so the law creates an imposition or obligation upon you to hand it over to the true owner of the purse or wallet. So even though there is no contractual obligation between you and the original owner, true owner, it law creates a contractual obligation on you to hand it over the purse or wallet to the true owner. So such obligations are known as quasi contracts. In other words, it is a contract in which there is no intention on part of either party to make a contract. But however, law imposes this upon the parties. This is basically from the point of view of unjust enrichment, for example. So, no one should be benefited at the cost of someone else. And the last part is e-contracts, which nowadays everyone are doing transactions through online, isn't it? So these are the contracts, we call it as most click contracts or EDI contracts. Like for example, transactions done with Amazon, Flipkart, eBay, Myntra, all these are examples for e-contracts, wherein through email or through electronic means you enter into contracts. Moving on to the next segment called the different type based on the performance of the contract, wherein executed contract is the first part. So the consideration in the given contract could be an act. So it is a contract where the parties to the contract have performed their promises. There is an executed contract. It is a contract where the parties to the contract have performed. It is a past tense. The performance has been done. So performed. For example, if someone is offering to sell his car to somebody else for 1 lakh rupees, so when the other person accepts the offer and if he pays and if the original party delivers the car, so it is a concluded contract or executed contract. So executory contract is the one where the performance to be done in future. It means both the parties to the contract are still to perform. They have not yet performed. They are still to perform. So in such case, we call it as executory contract. For example, when you have ordered a mobile phone through Amazon for cash on delivery arrangement. So it is delivered to be happen next week. So even the cash payment has to be done next week upon the delivery. So both the parties are yet to perform, still to perform. So you have to pay and they have to deliver. So both the parties have to perform yet. So their obligations are still pending. We call it as executory contract. And in subsequently there are subclassification in this is unilateral contract and bilateral contract. Unilateral are those where one side party is performed, the other side is pending. For example, when you book a ticket in the IRCTC railways, so for the journey which you are planning in the next month, so if you plan today and book it today, you have to pay it today. So your part of promise or obligation is completed by paying. So the IRCTC or railways promise is pending, which will happen in the next week or next month, wherever you are planning to go. So this is called as unilateral contract, wherein it is one party has performed by his duties and obligations, the other party's obligation is outstanding or pending. And the bilateral is the one where the obligation or promise is outstanding on the both part of the parties, where in the same example you can refer that cash on delivery with the Amazon application, where you have purchased the mobile phone and the mobile phone is yet to be delivered next week. So whenever there is a delivery happening, you will be making payment. So both the parties, yours and Amazon's, the contractual obligation is outstanding and we call it as bilateral contract. I hope you understood the different types of contract. in our next session, we will be discussing the differences between the void agreement and voidable contract, as well as void agreement and illegal agreement. So until then, please revise and please keep watching our videos. And if you like our videos, please like, share, and subscribe our channel Lathor Academy. Thank you.